And just to recap, for anybody that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting before on one of these webinars, I'm Katie Fye, and one of the directors of Better With Money, and we provide financial education workshops both in the workplace and through membership organisations to be able to support you to sort of reduce any money stress that you may have and help kind of increase your skills around sort of money management. So it's always a pleasure being able to deliver workshops on behalf of the ICE Benevolent Fund and the support network. So thank you to all of you for taking the time to sort of join me this afternoon. Now, just to put today's session into context, being unable to work or having to work sort of reduced hours because of sickness or disability can be incredibly stressful and a very worrying time. So trying on top of that to sort of navigate your way through the raft of information online to be able to determine what sort of support you're entitled to can only kind of amplify those feelings even further. So the purpose of today's session is very much to provide you with a brief overview of some of the support that's available should you or kind of any of your loved ones sort of become seriously ill or disabled. So over the next 20 minutes, we're going to be looking at the type of financial support available. We're going to have a look at universal credit. We're going to look at the new style employment and support allowance. We're going to have a look at personal independence payments, attendance and carers allowance, and then we're also sort of throughout those going to be having a look at the eligibility criteria that's in place as well. So starting us off sort of with employer-sponsored benefit. Now, out of the 14.1 million disabled people that we've got in the UK, more than 4.4 million are actually in work. So it's really important for us to spend some time understanding what support may exist even within your own place of work. So statutory sick pay is currently paying out £96.35 per week. It is quite commonplace for employers to pay an enhanced level of sick pay over and above what the statutory amount is. But it does very much depend on your contract of employment, and it may also have certain kind of eligibility requirements. Now, another employer-sponsored benefit you may have access to could be income protection. And for anybody that isn't familiar with that, that is an insurance that's usually paid for by the employer, and it replaces a percentage of your income in the event that you're unable to work. Now, usually there is a deferment period in place before that begins paying out, and the maximum percentage tends to be up to 75% of your annual salary. Now, it's really important to note that there's no insurance policy or statutory benefit that replaces 100% of your income in the event of kind of accident, illness, or even death. And the reason for that is that there has to be an incentive for us to return to work. So I quite regularly sometimes get asked the question, you know, am I able to insure myself, or could I take out a second form of insurance to be able to bridge over that gap? And nobody's allowed to be kind of 100% protected on their income. So, and it does come down to that sort of incentive for us to return to work. Now, critical illness is another benefit that some employers provide as part of kind of an overall employee benefit package. And again, that's an insurance, but different this time is that it actually pays out a lump sum upon diagnosis of a specified illness. And the really important word here is specified. So specified illness, it won't cover you for everything. And there will be a list of illnesses that are pre-prescriptive. And sadly, if you were to be diagnosed with something outside of that list, then the policy doesn't pay out. Personal accident cover. Now, again, that looks to provide you with a lump sum payment if seriously injured through an accident. Some employers will have that in place for you. And also it can be quite common for private medical insurance to exist as well. And that's another benefit that employers can put in place purely to support you with access to a network of private and NHS hospitals for treatment and rehabilitation services. And sometimes the key to that private medical insurance is that obviously you can bypass sort of what is, and we know currently, very lengthy sort of waiting lists. So the action here is for any of you that are employed to sort of dig out a copy of your employment contract or visit your employee benefit portal to just familiarise yourself with what sickness and disability benefits have you already got access to via your employer. And if that detail kind of isn't easy to find through your contract or through sort of your hub of information, then by all means, just contact your HR department to ask that question, because it's really important to just be aware of what it is that you've got through your place of work. Now, once we're clear on what support we can get through our place of employment, we then want to explore kind of our entitlement to statutory benefits. And these are kind of sickness and disability benefits that are provided by the government. And for many of them, we've actually accrued an entitlement for them through the national insurance that we pay. And these range right across kind of benefits, tax credits, there's direct payments available, grants, sort of, and various concessions, and I've listed them on the slide here. Now, we're going to be going sort of into some of these in more detail, but at the bottom of the slide, I've also put details of the Entitled To website. Very much does what it says on the tin. So it's a fantastic website that acts as a benefit calculator that you can just use to check what benefits you may be entitled to. So it's a brilliant sort of first port of call based on your circumstances to see what you've got access to. So the first benefit we're going to start with is universal credit. Now, this is a means-tested benefit that's looking to support claimants of working age that are on a low income. It actually replaces 6 existing means-tested benefits, and they're known as legacy benefits. And some of them, when I sort of read them out, you may be familiar with, or you may have heard about them before. And the 6 legacy benefits were income-based job seekers allowance, income-related employment and support allowance, income support, working tax credit, child tax credit, and housing benefit. So again, just important to note here, if you are already receiving one of these legacy benefits and your circumstances then change, then I would really recommend that you seek some advice prior to submitting an application for universal credit, because universal credit is now the new benefit that is replacing those 6 existing legacy benefits. Now, if you are in a couple and you're living in the same household, you have to make a joint claim for universal credit. So irrelevant of whether perhaps your partner is in a stronger financial position for you, it still needs to be a joint claim that goes in. And if eligible, you would then receive that monthly payment for the whole household. Now, with regards to how much you can get, there are sort of 3 steps to working out your universal credit payment. Firstly, it's your household sort of maximum universal credit amount. So that's made up essentially of the standard amount plus any additional amounts that may apply to you and your household. So some examples of that could be that you're sort of eligible for some housing cost benefit for raising your children, etc. And the second area is there could be money deducted because your earnings or your savings exceed thresholds. You may need to pay back some advances or some loans that you've taken out. So the maximum amount that can normally be taken out of your payment for those reasons is up to 25% of the standard allowance. So you may find that there's some deductions that need to be taken account of. And thirdly, if it applies to you, the benefit cap may also reduce how much you receive. So once the assessment's been made, it's pulled all of that detail in. If the benefit is going to exceed the benefit cap, then again, it will be reduced to make sure that it sits under that. Now, with regards to eligibility criteria for universal credit, it is available should you have low income or become unemployed. You would need to be aged 18 and over, and understate pension age, in order to get the full universal credit payment, you'd have to have under £6,000 in savings. And remember, that includes any savings your partner may have also. If you have any savings between 6,000 up to 16,000, then you would get a reduced payment. But if you or your partner have savings in excess of 16,000, then you cannot claim for universal credit. So it's very much a means tested benefit. It's also important just to note that if you are accepted for universal credit, then you can make a separate claim for reduced council tax. Frustratingly, it isn't given to you automatically. It does require a separate application. But for any more detail kind of on universal credit, I've just popped the web address at the bottom of this slide as well. Now, the next benefit I want to talk about is the new style employment and support allowance. And that's a benefit for anybody who has limited capacity for work because of an illness or disability. Now, you may recall that when we were just discussing universal credit, I mentioned that this is replacing 6 legacy benefits, one of which was a form of the employment and support allowance. But it's important to note that that is the income-related employment support allowance, and that has been replaced by universal credit, not the contribution-based ESA or employment support allowance, which is what we're going to be talking about now. So the government, for anybody who's perhaps already gone on to the gov.uk website to look at benefits, it is incredibly confusing. The landscape is very, very difficult to navigate, and it's purely because of this big change to benefits that we've seen, where we have lots of these legacy benefits that are still in place, but are also being superseded now through either universal credit or, in this example, the new style ESA that we're going to have a talk about. So when you first claim ESA, your basic amount is £74.70 per week if you're aged 25 and over, and that reduces to £59.20 per week if you're aged under 25. Now, after 3 months of claiming ESA, the DWP will then assess you. Depending on how much your condition affects you, they'll put you into either a work-related activity group or the support group. And that will then affect how much ESA payment you get moving forward. Now, if you're placed into the work-related group, and that group is actually for claimants who are considered to be capable of work at some point in the future and capable of kind of taking steps immediately towards moving into work, then that group is paid £74.70 per week. If you actually get placed in the support group, and the support group is very much for claimants who are living with a severe disability or a health condition, and it's unreasonable to require any sort of engagement in any form of work activity, then that group is actually currently being paid £114.10 per week. Now, some key eligibility criteria for ESA is that no statutory sick pay should be being paid. So if you are on a form of employer-sponsored benefit, you are in receipt of any statutory sick pay, then again, you wouldn't be able to make a claim at that moment in time for employment support allowance. You need to wait until you're coming to the end of that statutory sick pay. You need to be aged 16 and over for this benefit and still under state pension age. And it is a benefit that requires sufficient national insurance contributions in order to be eligible. So again, if that's something that you've got question marks over the national insurance contributions you've made, you can always check your national insurance contribution record online. And also, again, through using the entitled to calculator, it will give you an idea based on your circumstances around whether you are going to be eligible for a payment. Now, unlike universal credit, this isn't means tested, so savings are not relevant. So if you did have savings, you could still have an eligibility for an ESA. What it's looking at is that you've made enough national insurance contribution. And in order to receive the prolonged payment of the benefit, it does then require completion of a capability for work questionnaire first. And then that is followed up by a work capability assessment. And that then determines which of those two groups you're placed into and how much payment is going to be awarded. So sadly, as with lots of these benefits, it isn't just a case of us applying for them and getting them. There is also quite a strict assessment criteria that would be followed as well. So the next benefit that we're going to have a look at that's sort of in place to support you with any extra living costs due to an illness, a disability, or a mental health condition is personal independent payment, and that's known as PIP. So again, that's the acronym for that benefit. Now, personal independence payment has replaced what was known as the disability living allowance, so the DLA payment. And it can be claimed if you're still working. It doesn't matter if you have savings or if you're in receipt of any other benefits. So the personal independence payment tends to be sort of the most accessible of benefits because it isn't looking to sort of penalise against those savings, additional benefits or income that is still coming to you. Now, with regards to the amount that can be paid, this is split into two parts. So there is the daily living part. So that's if you need help with kind of everyday tasks. And the second is the mobility part. And that's very much focused around supporting you if you need help with getting around. Now, it is possible to get one or both parts, but the amount is very much dependent on how difficult those everyday tasks and getting around are assessed to be. Now, currently, the lower rate of daily living is £60. The higher rate is £89.60. And for the mobility, the lower rate is £23.70 and the higher rate is currently £62.55. Now, the DWP again carry out an assessment to determine how difficult undertaking those everyday tasks would be for a claimant and how difficult moving around are. And again, that is what sort of determines whether the lower rate or the higher rate is going to be paid. Now, in order to be eligible for personal independence payment, you will have need to sort of have had difficulties in doing everyday tasks and expect them to last for a minimum of 12 months. You need to be age 16 and over, and again, under state pension age. And again, we've got a benefit where it's going to be dependent upon an assessment that's being done from the Department of Work and Pensions. As listed on the slide, it is important to note that the mobility payment doesn't require a physical disability in order to be paid. So mental health conditions absolutely have a place here and they can impact on somebody's ability to move around. So therefore, that is very much considered. And again, it is another non-means tested benefit. Therefore, any money in savings is not taken into account, and there is also no requirement for sufficient national insurance contributions. So, like I said before, it is one of the more accessible benefits in the UK. There's no application process for this benefit, unlike the others. So with this one, you would have to call the number shown on the slide in order to start the claim process. And then after that phone call, they would send you out a form that would need to be fully completed and returned. And then upon receipt of that, that's when your assessment would be booked in, and it would determine what parts of the payment are going to be paid out and whether they're going to be at the lower rate or the higher rate. Lastly, I wanted to just draw some attention to attendance allowance and carers allowance, as even if it sort of isn't something that is relevant to you personally, it may be very relevant for your parents or perhaps loved ones who might be caring for somebody who's seriously ill or has a disability. And the detail on the slide is kind of pretty self-explanatory. But what I did want to point out is that claiming attendance allowance doesn't reduce any other benefit income received. And in fact, it can actually give entitlement to some other benefits like pension credit, a reduction in council tax, etc. But if somebody claims carer's allowance, they need to be aware that this can change the benefit entitlement for the person they are caring for. And it can also affect their own benefit entitlement. So it's one to be careful with, and worth somebody speaking to citizens' advice first before making that claim. Because what you tend to find with the carer's allowance is it can sort of sit with sort of universal credit, and somebody could be on quite a low income, so they're on universal credit and they've qualified for that. But the reason they're on a low income is because they're actually caring for somebody, so they want to apply for the carer's allowance. And actually, that's when there can be a conflict between the benefits. So it's about making sure that they put themselves in the strongest financial position, rather than just kind of, ploughing into an application for a new benefit. And actually what it does is it lessens their entitlement. So it just to point that one out and to take some care on that one. Now, aside from the core benefits that we've covered that are available through the state, there are a variety of other forms of support and concessions that are available from the government. So I've listed them here for your reference, and they are well worth exploring in more detail should your circumstances mean that you have a need to use some of them. I know just through kind of employees that I've worked with and friends of friends that the mobility scheme tends to be incredibly popular for people who do have sort of disability and do have challenges around their mobility, to be able to sort of buy and lease cars through that scheme. And also, when it comes to sort of care as well, sometimes people prefer to receive direct payment to be able to then, sort of pick essentially their own carers, rather than going through kind of social services for that benefit. Council tax reduction, again, is one that more people have entitlement to than they realise, and is very under sort of explored. Blue badges, obviously vehicle tax exemption, disabled person's rail card as well. So my mother-in-law, actually, she is partially sighted, still very, very proud, very active and mobile, but she didn't realise that she did actually qualify for a disabled person's rail card. So for her, that's been quite a sort of significant cost saving for her of going into London and so forth for job requirements. But she just assumed that because she could work and because she does have some level, obviously, of sight, she wouldn't actually be eligible. So sometimes, it doesn't necessarily need to be a very severe form of illness or disability for you to be able to take advantage. And like I said, through your working career, that is what your national insurance has been paying for. So your tax and national insurance that goes to the government very much is being used to provide these provisions. So, please don't struggle alone. If you are finding things financially difficult, if you have got serious illness or any form of disability that is impacting on your life or your mobility, then please do, spend some time through that entitled to calculator to put in your circumstances and just see if there is something that can just, remove some of that burden and help make life that little bit easier for you. So that said, I have sort of detailed some websites here because I'm conscious we've covered sort of a lot of detail in a very short space of time, because it was designed to kind of be a whistle-top just tour through these benefits. You probably have picked up on the fact that the benefit space is very detailed. There's lots of different elements and components that sit within each of the benefits. And also, obviously, we've only really focused on sort of illness and disability. There is a whole raft of other benefits, that are out there, like job seekers and so forth. So I have put some different websites up here that have some fantastic resources, information that help to really simplify what's available and how you will go about kind of claiming that support where needed. And also there's some fantastic charitable websites on here as well that also look to support. And that said, you have got access to fantastic support through the ICE Benevolent Fund and the Support Network, who have sponsored the webinar today. They can provide you with invaluable kind of financial, workplace and wellbeing support to you and your families. So just as a reminder, I've put their website and helpline numbers here so that you can find out more information. But the important thing I just kind of want to finish on is, you know, it can feel incredibly lonely when you go through a period of illness or certainly disability, and you're not alone. So, you know, certainly for those of you that are on the webinar, you are very fortunate to have, you know, the ICE BEN Fund and Support Network facilities, but also, you know, we have got a whole state funded level of support that exists as well. So it's about looking at what you can get through your employer, then looking at what you can get in terms of statutory benefits, and then also, you know, you've got those auxiliary services around your beneficiary sort of funds, your support networks, your sort of employer, you might have EAP lines, you've got charities as well that are set up to support people in times of difficulty and hardship. So please do reach out. We've got some time left for questions. So I'm going to hand back over to Sarah so that we can make sure you've had the opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. So I will hand back to Sarah and we will run through those questions that have come in.
Thank you very much, Katie. Plenty of really useful information there. Thank you. We have had a couple of questions come in. First of all, is there a time limit to how long someone can claim contribution-based ESA?
It depends very much on the group that you get placed into. So for the group where there's sort of an expectation, let me just flip back to the slide. For the kind of work-related activity group, where it's expected that you will be returning to work, it goes without saying that that payment will, you know, the view is that that payment will come to a stop once they kind of get somebody back into work. The support group, there's no time limit, simply because that group, you would have been placed into that group because you are deemed to have an illness or a disability that's so severe that sadly, you know, work just will not be being seen as happening for that individual. So therefore, no, there's no time limit. There would only be a time limit if obviously miraculously that circumstance was to change and somebody is in a position to be able to go back to work.
Thank you, that's great. And the next question we have is the Disabled Facilities Grant means tested?
That some are and some aren't. So even under the Disability Facilities Grant, there's different streams around what it's looking to support you with. So is it for kind of home adjustments? Is it certain bits of equipment that are required? So it does very much depend on what the grant would be looking to provide as to whether they feel there's grounds for it or whether actually, because you've got savings, it doesn't kind of qualify you for what that adjustment is. So there's certain grants that no, aren't means tested, and there are certain levels of grants that wouldn't be paid out if somebody did have sort of sufficient savings, and it would be expected that that could be used instead.